We're delighted to have with us Anna Verwaal, if I've got that correct, Anna. Anna is a maternal child health nurse, conscious conception and birth consultant, pre and perinatal educator from the Netherlands. Thank you, Anna, for being with us this evening and daytime for you, my dear. After a long career in various obstetrical, neonatal, and home health settings, she preferred to work with families and babies as a specialized nurse educator and started her own practice in Los Angeles. So you're in the AM then, if you're in Los Angeles. Am I right?
Oh, no, no, I am not. I'm in the PM zone right now. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Well, Anna, currently, we believe you have a private practice that is supporting your clients integrate their pre and perinatal experiences, inspiring couples to consciously conceive. And Anna has been a long-term member of APPPAH, the Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology. Anna, take it away. Thank you.
thank you for the lovely introduction and your beautiful accent. Here's another one. First, I would really love to thank Laura, Carla, and Susanna for inviting me to be part of this impressive lineup of speakers at this conference. And I also want to thank you for making it available for free, because I think it is so important to offer this to so many nations where people need this information and they might have not been able to pay for a regular kind of conference. So thank you for doing that. I am speaking to you from the Netherlands, a small country in Europe where I was born 60 years ago. And I left Netherlands when I was in my early 20s after I became a nurse, and I started working in the Middle East. And I thought to use my 20 minutes, I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey and what I met and my own growth in those 20 years to how Anna started, Anna 1.0, to the version that is sitting and speaking to you now. One of the things that happened when I was working in Saudi Arabia is that one day at work, somebody handed me a bunch of cloth and I put it down on a table. And when I laid it down on the table, it moved. And when I opened it up, I found a little baby inside. And when I looked at the baby, it was a baby that was probably born at 28 weeks. He was born through Bedouin parents in the desert who felt he looks too little for us to keep walking. So let's put him in a hospital. And they did. And the thing is that they never came back to pick him up. So I looked after this little baby for a long time. I was working in that hospital, but very early on, what moved me was the way he was able to look around and his level of consciousness. And not knowing how pictures would be used, I don't have the images in this presentation. So I'll just describe the moment when he reached out and grabbed my finger. And I wondered, how conscious are you when you're in the womb? Because this baby should have been in the womb another 12 weeks. Then how conscious are we really? And it kind of amazed me that I've never learned anything about that in any of my trainings, you know, to be able to work with newborn babies in hospital setting. Well, to make a long story short, the Gulf War broke out. So that's how many years ago that was. It was in the 1990s. And I moved to Los Angeles, where I got a job at UCLA Medical Center. And I started working in the labor and delivery unit. And as I said, I came from roots from the Netherlands, and now I started working in a big hospital in the city in Los Angeles, and I saw a whole different way of how birth was done. It was nothing like how I was brought up culturally, because the Netherlands was the country known for home birth and midwifery model of care. And here I saw young women all being delivered by a medical system, an obstetrical system. And I looked around and I wondered, wow, why is it that we actually allow trained surgeons to try to do normal birth? Is that one of the reasons why we are seeing so much high-tech birth, where it could have been so low-tech if we would have had a different model of care in supporting these women and babies? Another thing that I did was I was watching, what does it do to a baby to be pulled out? What does it do to a baby when we're pulled out by vacuum? What does it do when we're pulled out by cesarean? And I watched that for many years, you know, and I wondered. I also started supporting women in giving birth and I started working as a home health maternal-child health nurse. So I did 6 or 7 baby mom visits per day in the city of Los Angeles, and I noticed what had the effect been of the birth experience already on bonding or difficulty or breastfeeding challenges. And when you work only in a hospital setting, you have no idea what you find when you go out in the community and you see already the effect of the birth experience, what it had done to the moms and babies that I had to deal with in my job. And after doing that for a few years, I went, Anna, you need to just start your own thing. You need to just be able to prepare women for birth. Could we, when we prepare them, prevent things from happening to them? So I undid all my nursing hats and my other hats. I took them off and I started just watching women and helping them give birth. And from that time, I learned even more, because I saw that a way a woman gives birth very much was affected by how she had been born herself. And that was something else I'd never learned in any of my trainings. But I literally spent time with women that were giving birth and that would call out at the end of the experience, please get this baby out of me now. And I would sit there and go, what happened to her? Why is she saying that? And then when I started talking to my clients afterwards, I learned that they had been pulled out themselves by a forceps, and that I was watching something that I started calling cellular memory in motion. And not only did I see that with the women giving birth, I also saw their partners sometimes go through an experience that was completely an activation of their own birth experience. And I photographed it in all those years. I photographed how women birth. I photographed the fearful faces of babies and the completely blissed out faces of babies that were allowed to come in the world in their own timing. They were allowed to come in the world with their mom's hormonal physiology in optimal form. They came into the world without being disturbed. So for many years, I saw so many different experiences, and I didn't know who to talk to about what it had seen. And what I realized is I saw the answers already to experiences, but I didn't know who to ask my questions to. So I asked the universe at one point, I said, please help me understand what I'm seeing and how am I supposed to work with this? And then I was invited to have lunch with a doctor, a psychologist in San Diego called David Chamberlain. And at the time, I did not know who he was. But I did know that if he was a psychologist, I should ask him, is it possible that babies remember birth? And he looked at me very intently after I asked him that. And then he walked away. And I thought, oh God, maybe that was a dumb question. I shouldn't have asked him. But what happened was he came back to the dining table and he put a book on my plate. And the book was titled, Babies Remember Birth. So that was the moment I realized that this was the big birth psychologist, Dr. David Chamberlain. And he looked at me and he said, you're right, babies do remember birth. And I don't remember what we ate. I just remember crying and talking about, oh my God, finally someone who believes me. And then he said, you know what, why don't you become a member of APPPAH? Because first of all, you will take our average age down by a couple of decades. But it's also because I want to introduce you to Thomas Burney and introduce you to the things that we do in our association. So I remember walking into the first birth conference I ever attended, the APPPAH conference, and it was really as if I walked into a room and I felt I've met the tribe, my tribe. This was my soul tribe. These are people that spoke my language. And these were doctors, they were neonatologists, they were pediatricians, they were gynecologists, and I went, wow, what an amazing group of people. So I have followed everything that they wrote and that they talked about, and at one point started spreading this information. But another person that I really kind of read to is when I still worked in high-risk obstetrics, I had to do different kind of trainings to get my continuing education credits. And I attended a workshop of Dr. Sarah Buckley. And Sarah Buckley spoke about oxytocin. And here I was sitting in the room, a labor and delivery nurse who used to hang IVs filled with oxytocin and tell my patients, it's the same hormone your body makes. I'm putting in the same thing. And in one half an hour talk, listening to Dr. Sarah Buckley, I learned that my whole career, the work I was doing, I went like, I can't do this no more. So the more I learned about hormonal physiology and how we were actually disturbing it in hospital settings so often, the more I learned about pre and perinatal psychology. And the more I felt in my own body attending birth, where my own birth experiences had stored themselves. And when that started coming up, and that was the times when I had to take a baby from the arms of a mother to bring it to the newborn nursery, because that was hospital need at that time, because there were too many pregnant women lined up that needed to be in that room, I started feeling, oh my God, there's something happening in me that I'm feeling that doesn't feel right. I was sometimes attending births where I could already feel my shoulder, and I go, what's wrong with my shoulder? It wasn't until many years later that I discovered I had broken my clavicula at birth. I wasn't told, I didn't know, but my body remembered and was starting to put me in touch with the discomfort of this experience. And then I started looking around at my colleagues, and I started looking around at the way they worked. I started looking at obstetricians. They started panicking. What happened to them? I started asking them, what do you know about how you were born? And what do you know about your birth? And what do you know about your birth? And I got the most profound answers. First, people thought I was a bit crazy. But then people were saying, oh my God, I had a very short cord, my mom told me, or I was immediately taken away too. And those were often the nurses that had the hardest time separating babies from their moms. They were doing everything they could to keep the baby with the mother. So I started seeing that in my own colleagues, in myself, in my clients, there's such a thing as memory of our experiences. But why wasn't I taught any of this in any of my trainings? As a pediatric nurse, I worked in neonatology, I worked in the obstetrical department, I worked postpartum, I worked home health, I worked in lactation. Never a word about any of this. So I felt I had to leave that system altogether to start teaching and to start looking at what is it that we need to do. What is it we need to do is change the way we're educated. We need to change the way we birth practitioners are going to practice. We need to incorporate everything about how were we born ourselves. And that starts at conception. What happened at our conception, what happened in the time in the womb, what happened in the time leading up to our birth, what happened during our birth and right afterwards, is something that gets repeated over and over again. And if it gets repeated in the people coming to give birth, and it's being repeated in the people assisting those who are giving birth, and there's no awareness, then we keep repeating and repeating and repeating many things that I think can be prevented. So much of my healing came from being in touch with my own inner child and understanding what she had gone through at her birth experience, which made me understand my passion and also made me understand sometimes the anger that I felt when I saw the system wasn't sensitive to that. I also learned over time that it isn't anger that changes the world. That era is long gone. It's compassion and it is understanding what happened in the history of obstetrics that is going to help change the way we can do birth, and that we support birth. So there's much that I think about what can we do in birthing environments. There is much I think that we can do around teaching women how their bodies work. As long as we have countries where keeping a pre-honeymoon vagina is more important than how we welcome a baby into the world. And yes, you heard me correctly, because there are countries where that is being sold as a reason to have a cesarean birth. But we're not teaching anybody what cesarean birth does to a culture, what cesarean birth does to children. And yes, if we need to do a cesarean birth for the safety of the mother and child, of course we need to do it. But even then, we in hospital settings should learn about how to support a mother, how to support a baby that have undergone this experience, how we have caused a rupture between the two, how we need to repair it. And there are so many things that when I started teaching, that in my workshops, I started learning about the people I was teaching, that there were patterns created about how they had been born. Then, I mean, we can work with that. Then we can, ahead of time, before someone gives birth, say, let me talk to you about your forceps birth experience. This might show up when you're going to give birth. And let's look at what effect it had on you so that we don't have to fear it when you give birth. So there's so many things I think we can do preventatively, that what I'm learning now is that the way we are being taught is lacking so many of the things that I think are so essential to transforming the birth experience, both for the couples and the babies being born and giving birth, but also for people working in the birth environment. We also need to be supported about how did we arrive on this planet. You know, and when I talk about that and I show images in my lectures here in Holland or wherever I teach, I see so many people respond to going, oh my God, yes, that fear on the obstetrician's face. We see that so often when they need to come in and rescue a baby at birth. And then I wish, could we have talked to this doctor and said, how were you born? Are you realizing that you keep rescuing yourself over and over and over and over? Or that you perhaps keep rescuing your mother and what she had to go through? So I call it that the soul of birth is missing. And the soul of what Laura so soulfully described, there's so much of that that I think is missing in the current way we assist women in childbirth and we prepare for birth. So in Holland now, I see that the people that have come through workshops, they understand birth imprints. They know how to address them much better, talk about it in the prenatal history of a mom. And if we can make conscious that wishes to be seen, felt, so it can be healed, then we see less repetition of that needing to happen. You know, so I think that we can look so much at preventative obstetrical practices by including how someone has been born themselves and knowing about that and learning how to work with that. And what I see now is that we have what I call team healing, is what is being prepared to help people heal from experiences. Once they've gone through their own healing, they feel that they want to be part of team prevention. And what is team prevention? Team prevention is the team that says, wow, if we do this with more consciousness, then we maybe don't have to heal from all kinds of experiences that we now no longer need to create to get that awareness. So I, for myself, realized that coming into this world, I had a hard time landing in a world that I felt this is really not my world, you know, and for the longest time, I felt this is difficult to be on this planet. And many of people that attend workshops say, we feel the same. And I realize now that I didn't come for the world I was born into. I came for the world that I'm going to help create. That's why I was born. So many of you feel that same desire of creating that new world, creating beautiful environments where birth is once again considered sacred and not just something you need to do. Babies shouldn't be delivered. No, in the West, I said pizzas are delivered. Babies should be allowed to be born. You know, so we have to stop delivering babies. We have to stop looking at the way medical doctors were trained. We have to retrain medical doctors. And I'm going to speak a little bit about what happened to me this week. I was invited to speak for a group of specialists, for a group of doctors. They asked me, could you please talk to us about pre and perinatal imprints, because we've seen some podcasts and we would like to learn about it because we don't get any of that in our training. I was there 2 days ago. When I drove up to the location where they asked me to come and teach, it smelled like cow poop. And I went, what an interesting place to teach a bunch of doctors and specialists. It smells like very natural. It was like kind of like a farm. And when I entered the room where they asked me to sit and have my organic cup of coffee with plant-based milk and honey, they said, someone will come and get you. And when that someone came to get me, I saw that she had very sensitive eyes. And she said, we just came out of a deep process where we had a deep meditation. So you're walking in us rather a little bit sensitive and raw. I'm like, that's okay. It's the same as when I walk into a woman laboring. I'll be careful. But when I walked up the stairs to this room where these doctors were waiting for me to teach them something, it smelled like Palo Santo. And I went, that's an unusual smell. There's nothing antiseptic about this bunch of people. And then when I walked in, they were all lying around on yoga mats. Yoga mats, people. Specialists, oncologists, surgeons, doctors that work at home, doctors that work in hospital setting, internists. And I went, who are these people? And then they invited me to talk to them about these subjects, about pre and perinatal psychology. I drag a bag full of books with me to show them. These are already books that are out there. You should know about them. And I showed Thomas's book, The Embodied Mind. I said, that's part of our recommended reading. We already have that book. And then I went, oh my God. So I want to end this talk, and I have no idea how long I'm going or if I'm going over time, by how positive I felt after this. There are doctors that are really feeling they want to learn, they want to relearn, they want to learn about birth, they want to learn, they understand these are body-mind doctors. This is what they're becoming. With all the specializations they have, they feel that they're not helping their patients in the way that they feel they can. And I said, you have to start at the beginning of life. How was someone created? What are the conception imprints? What are the birth imprints? And with conception imprints, how did we come into being? Was it very technical? Was it inside the body, or was it in the petri dish? We are seeing huge differences with the way people are being created. And as Laura so beautifully explained, we also see many people that don't have that kind of beginning in life. And they can run into problems later that they need to be supported with. So this group of doctors wanting to change obstetrics as well. There were 2 obstetricians in this group that talked to me about, but we do talk to babies in our hearts when we have to do something that doesn't feel good. And I do say, I'm sorry. I'm like, next time, say it out loud so everyone in the room around you can hear it. But thank you for already being that conscious for what you're doing with babies and in childbirth. So my last little member, one thing, when I was having lunch with these doctors after this talk I gave them, I'll never forget that the doctor said in front of me and said, you know what, we're realizing how we have been part of the agenda of Big Pharma. We have not been taught how to heal people. We have been taught to study medicine. We have become a prescription pad for the pharmaceutical industries. So do not underestimate how birth is part of that agenda, how women were never meant to lie on their backs. We are mammals that were allowed to move freely. We were mammals that were allowed to have our hormonal physiology of childbirth lead the childbirth journey. And we were never meant to separate from our babies if it wasn't medically necessary for that to happen. And even then, we need to offer repair for the rupture that has caused. So now my youngest member of Team Healing is a 7-year-old girl who came to a lecture that I gave for 100 people. And she was the one who at age 7 dared to stand up at the end of the lecture and said, I came because I want to ask you something. I want to ask you why my brother and I were born at 28 weeks and 2 days. I'm like, sweetheart, I don't have the answer. You have the rest of your life to figure out why you decided to come this early. But what I can tell you is the effect this birth experience might have had on you. And when I explained that in the room, I felt the shock wave going through the adults, because every inner child inside this adult heard their story acknowledged in what had happened to them. So it's time for us to speak up. It is time for us to become truthful. It is time for us to expose the agendas that have kept women lying on their backs. And we have to support midwifery model of care, because the midwife is the gatekeeper to a higher consciousness in her community. And that is why so many midwives around the world are being phased out, including in my country. So I think we need to hold hands together and create childbirth facilitators. And what is a childbirth facilitator? It was a beautiful term that we came to last year when I was in India, because we're trying to set up a place where birth can happen as a holy experience in an incredible environment, is that we're training everyone to understand and utterly respect the hormonal physiology of childbirth, where we are going to teach pre and perinatal psychology to everybody, where we're going to help couples understand their own birth imprints, where we expose the agenda of how birth became the industrialized process it has become and turned into. And then what we're going to do is create places where babies and souls can be welcomed, connectedly, caringly, and consciously. So I invite you all to be part of that around the world. I have no idea how long I've talked, but thank you all.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Anna. We would love to continue hearing more from you. But because we're running short on time, I do want to take one or two of the questions that we have. It's actually mentioned
first.
Go ahead, right. It's
I can't hear you.
So the question that Matthias has for us is, if we have the footprint of our ancestral DNA, I would like to add, in our body cells, how vividly is this prenatal memory within us, consciously or subconsciously? I'm also adding unconsciously. How much is this memory guiding our behaviors and choices? And therefore, the question that arises is, how can we help shift our behavior so as we don't pass on these behavior patterns to the next generation?
I think it's an incredible question. I would want an hour to answer it.
Yes. And maybe I'll club the second question so you can sort of all tie it up together.
What's the second one?
And that is from Susanna. She says, since you started your journey until now, what do you think have been the changes in the way that we are perceiving the importance of the prenatal period? And how would you like to see it in the future? You've mentioned a bit of that now already, the big pharma and everything. But in terms of behavior and patterns, let's look at how can we change it, not only just the prenatal education with the parents, but also with the doctors and with the midwives, as you said.
To start, when the doctors asked me if I want to speak at the next gynecology conference, I said I will wear an organic diaper to catch my meconium, but I will stand on that stage to do it, because it's important. When doctors also learn about how they were born, and this is the answer to the question, when we learn about how birth shows up in our own lives, because cellular memory is pre-verbal, it will come up when activated. It doesn't matter that we came through thousands of years of women birthing naturally. What happens is that sometimes your imprint shows up, and it is because it wants to be worked with. I see it as a continuation of us becoming more conscious. We become conscious because it invites you to look at your own birth imprint. It invites you to look at the difficulty it's causing in your life. And when you do that, you become so compassionate that the depth of your own ability to sink into what happened to you, you will be able to reach people from that place. That is what needs to happen. So that's why I welcome it when I see it happen. I don't judge it. I go, come, you can heal from this. We can heal from these early imprints. So yes, we have inside us the cells that tell us what the blueprint is, but we also have the imprint on top of it that plays out. And in most people, we don't see it coming. And what happens is that most of us are surviving because of it instead of thriving. And only when we start thriving, we become free to feel so many other things, because that is the journey to higher consciousness. We are deliberately sometimes, I think, kept in the dark. So let's turn on some light and let's teach this to doctors around the world and to pregnant couples. I think we need a different kind of prenatal education program and a pre-conception preparation program to teach this, to remind us.
And for me, I think I'd like to close by also saying that maybe we want to all experience that level of tangible sensitivity that you felt when you walked into that room smelling the Palo Santo. That sort of really, I could almost feel it. It was so palpable. I said, that is what we want. As a woman, as a mother, I say, I know this is what I want to experience in every room, everywhere. Like I really want to.
You want to walk into an environment that welcomes you like that. So we need to create sacred birthing sanctuaries.
Yeah.
Where you're going to be a birth facilitator, because that's all we do. We facilitate birth. We don't do anything else. It's the mother giving birth. It's the baby being born, and we make sure that it happens safely and sacredly, and that's it.
Well, Anna, thank you. It's been such a pleasure having you with us this evening, and we look forward to your continued presence with us for the rest of our journey, and continue enlightening us with your deep and wonderful work. Thank you again. Thank you.